Most people think the best way to deal with a toxic person is to fight back, stand your ground, prove them wrong, set them straight. It sounds reasonable. After all, if someone keeps pushing your buttons, shouldn't you push back? But here's what almost nobody tells you. Every time you react exactly the way they expect, you're often giving them precisely what they wanted in the first place. The strange part is that many toxic people aren't looking for agreement. They're looking for emotional control. Your frustration becomes their reward. Your anger becomes proof that they've gotten inside your head. And without realizing it, you begin playing a game whose rules they wrote long before you walked into it. Psychologists have spent decades studying why certain personalities manipulate, provoke, and emotionally drain the people around them. What they've discovered isn't just surprising, it's incredibly practical. The smartest people don't win by arguing harder. They win by refusing to play the game everyone else is trapped inside. Today, you'll learn 5 psychological strategies that quietly protect your mind, weaken manipulation before it takes hold, and help you stay emotionally untouchable. They're backed by real psychological research, yet they're rarely discussed outside academic journals and therapy rooms. Once you notice these patterns, you'll never see toxic people the same way again. 1. Imagine someone criticizing you for something small. Maybe it's your work, your appearance, even the way you speak. Your instinct is immediate. You explain yourself. You defend your intentions. You try to convince them they're wrong. It feels productive. In reality, it often feeds the exact cycle you're trying to escape. The psychologist Albert Bandura, famous for developing social cognitive theory, showed that human behavior is strongly influenced by reinforcement. Behaviors that receive attention, even negative attention, are often repeated because they achieve their goal. For many toxic personalities, attention is the reward, not kindness, not agreement, attention. When you spend 20 minutes defending yourself against a baseless accusation, you've invested emotional energy while they've invested almost nothing. Smart people recognize this imbalance. Instead of defending every accusation, they ask themselves a simple question. Is this person trying to understand me, or are they trying to control my attention? Those are completely different conversations. If the goal isn't mutual understanding, explanations rarely solve anything. Silence often says more. A calm, "I don't see it that way," followed by changing the subject, removes the reward they were hoping for. Notice how uncomfortable that feels at first. That's because your brain craves closure. Research by psychologist Arie Kruglanski on the need for cognitive closure shows that people naturally want certainty and resolution. Toxic individuals often exploit that tendency by keeping arguments open-ended, pulling you back in over and over. The smartest response isn't always the most satisfying in the moment. It's the one that protects your peace tomorrow. And once you stop rewarding manipulation with endless explanations, something unexpected begins to happen. The game starts losing its power. 2. Here's something you may have never noticed. Toxic people are remarkably good at making you question your own reality. A conversation ends, and somehow you're apologizing for something they started. You leave wondering if you overreacted. Maybe you're too sensitive. Maybe you remembered it wrong. That confusion isn't accidental. Psychologist Jennifer Freyd, known for her work on betrayal trauma, explains that manipulation often depends on creating uncertainty inside the other person's mind. When someone consistently causes you to doubt your own experiences, your confidence slowly shifts from internal evidence to external approval. That's exactly where manipulation becomes easiest. Smart people do something different. They stop relying solely on memory. They rely on patterns. One rude comment can be a bad day. 5 identical conversations spread across 6 months? That's a pattern. Instead of asking, "Did this one interaction upset me?" they ask, What keeps happening every time I'm around this person? Patterns are much harder to deny than isolated moments. This is also why therapists often encourage journaling after emotionally confusing interactions. Writing events down before your memory becomes distorted gives your brain something objective to return to later. If you've ever reread an old journal entry and realized this keeps happening, you've experienced the power of pattern recognition. And here's something interesting. If this video is helping you see people in a different light, let me know in the comments which of these psychological tricks you've already experienced. And if you're enjoying this kind of psychology-based content, subscribing helps you catch future videos exploring how the mind really works. Because the next trick might be the hardest of them all. It asks you to stop trying to be understood by someone who has no intention of understanding you.
3. One of the biggest mistakes people make with toxic individuals is believing that empathy will eventually change them. You tell yourself, maybe they're just stressed. They've had a difficult childhood. They probably don't realize how they're affecting people. Compassion is a beautiful quality, but compassion without boundaries often becomes permission. Psychologist Susan David, a faculty member at Harvard Medical School and author of Emotional Agility, argues that emotional intelligence isn't about suppressing difficult emotions or endlessly accommodating others. It's about recognizing what you're feeling without allowing those feelings to dictate your actions. Smart people understand something subtle. You can understand someone's pain without volunteering to carry it. Those are two completely different things. Think about the people who leave every conversation feeling emotionally exhausted. Notice what happens. They vent. You listen. They criticize someone else. You reassure them. They create another crisis. You solve it. Weeks turn into months. Nothing changes. Research on emotional contagion by psychologist Elaine Hatfield and her colleagues shows that emotions spread between people almost like a virus. The longer you're exposed to chronic negativity, the more likely your own emotional state begins to mirror it, even if you don't consciously realize it's happening. That's why smart people don't just ask, "Is this person a good person?" They ask a more useful question. How do I consistently feel after spending time with them? That single question cuts through excuses. If every interaction leaves you anxious, defensive, guilty, or emotionally depleted, your nervous system is trying to tell you something your rational mind keeps explaining away. You don't have to hate someone to create distance. Sometimes distance is the healthiest form of compassion for both of you. And that leads to a psychological trick that feels almost unfair because of how effective it is. 4. Most toxic people expect predictability. They know exactly which words will make you defensive. They know which topics will pull you into an argument. They know how long it takes before you finally lose your patience. In other words, they've studied you. But what happens when the script suddenly changes? Behavioral economist and psychologist Daniel Kahneman spent decades studying how our brains rely on expectations and mental shortcuts. Much of human behavior runs on prediction. We constantly anticipate what comes next. Manipulation works the same way. It depends on predictable reactions. If someone insults you expecting an emotional explosion, but receives a calm smile and a simple, "That's your opinion," something unexpected happens. Their prediction fails. The conversation loses momentum. You've interrupted the psychological pattern they were counting on. This doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming unpredictable in healthy ways. Respond more slowly. Pause before answering. Refuse invitations into pointless debates. Sometimes ask a question instead of giving a defense. Sometimes say nothing at all. Silence can be psychologically powerful because people naturally rush to fill it. Studies on conversational dynamics have shown that uncomfortable pauses increase self-monitoring, often causing the other person to reveal more than they intended. Smart people know that self-control is contagious. When one person refuses emotional chaos, the other person has far fewer tools to create it. You don't need the perfect comeback. You need to become impossible to predict. Because the final strategy isn't about changing toxic people. It's about making sure they no longer have access to the version of you they once controlled.
5. Here's the trick that almost nobody talks about. Smart people stop asking, "How do I deal with this person?" Instead, they ask, "What version of me does this person bring out?" That question changes everything. Because toxic relationships aren't just about someone else's behavior, they're about the identity you slowly adopt in response to it. Maybe you become the person who's always apologizing. Maybe you become hyper-vigilant, analyzing every text message before you send it. Maybe you start censoring your opinions just to avoid another argument. Eventually, you don't recognize yourself anymore. Psychologist John Gottman, after studying thousands of relationships over several decades, found that certain interaction patterns, especially contempt, defensiveness, criticism, and stonewalling, predict relationship breakdown with remarkable accuracy. But another finding is just as important. Healthy relationships allow people to remain themselves. Unhealthy ones slowly reshape who they believe they have to be. That's why the smartest people don't measure relationships by history. They measure them by identity. Who are you becoming? Are you calmer, more confident, more curious? Or are you constantly anxious, walking on eggshells, rehearsing conversations that haven't even happened yet? Your nervous system keeps score long before your conscious mind is. Neuroscientist Stephen Porges, through polyvagal theory, explains that your autonomic nervous system is continuously scanning for cues of safety or danger. You may not consciously notice it, but your body does. Think about the people who make your shoulders relax the moment they walk into the room. Now think about the people whose name appearing on your phone instantly raises your heart rate. Your body already knows the difference. Smart people trust that signal. They don't wait for undeniable proof. They don't wait until every boundary has been crossed. They don't wait until they're emotionally exhausted. They pay attention to consistent patterns, protect their attention, maintain their boundaries, and choose environments where they don't have to become someone else just to survive. The greatest psychological trick isn't learning how to defeat toxic people. It's becoming emotionally unavailable to their game. Once they realize they can no longer predict you, control you, or drain your energy, they often lose interest, not because they've changed, but because the reward has disappeared. And that's a victory no argument could ever achieve.
Most of us spend years believing that strength means enduring difficult people. We tell ourselves that if we're patient enough, kind enough, or understanding enough, eventually they'll change. Sometimes they do. Many times they don't. The uncomfortable truth is that your peace of mind isn't built by convincing the wrong people to treat you better. It's built by choosing not to hand them the keys to your emotional life. The smartest people aren't emotionally cold. They're emotionally selective. They know that attention is one of the most valuable things they own, and they spend it with the same care that others spend money. Because every moment you give to unnecessary conflict is a moment you can't invest in your own growth, your closest relationships, or the life you're trying to build. There will always be people who thrive on drama, criticism, or control. You don't have to become one of them. Sometimes the strongest response isn't louder words, sharper arguments, or the perfect comeback. Sometimes it's simply becoming someone they can no longer reach. And the day you realize your peace is more valuable than winning an argument is the day toxic people begin losing their power over you.